Alrighty, we'll start here and allow more people to enter the meeting as we move along. As I said, just a reminder that we are recording this special webinar. My name is Eli Saltzman. I'm an associate research professor of Israel Studies and the director of the Gildenhorn Institute for Israel Studies at the University of Maryland at College Park. I'd like to express my deepest gratitude to Avis Koyman and Srushti Suresh for all their assistance behind the scenes that made this and all other events possible. This is the 14th this year, so a major undertaking on their behalf. I would like to thank the audience for joining us today for this special webinar titled Balancing Faith and Duty, Religious Policy and Public Discontent in the Israeli Military, featuring Dr. Niva Golan Nadir, whom I'll introduce momentarily. And I'll just say that tomorrow is the last day of the academic year at UMD, and since September 2024, we have hosted 14 events, as I said, some in person and most of them online. One of the previous events actually dealt with the religious divides in Israeli society post-October 7th, 2023. So today, we are addressing the topic in a way from a different perspective, but we're still in this realm of religion, Judaism, state, and so on and so forth. Today's timely and thought-provoking discussion explores the complex and often fraught intersection of religion, military service, and civil-military relations in Israel, as I said. As a country where compulsory service in the IDF plays a central role in national identity and social cohesion, and where the military is a reflection of major societal undercurrents, the ways in which religious norms and policies influence military life have significant implications, not only for the soldiers themselves, but also for the broader public as well. At the heart of today's conversation are critical questions. How does the IDF navigate the challenges of religious accommodations in a diverse and increasingly polarized society? What happens when state institutions, especially the military, becomes sites of tension between religious authority and liberal democratic values? And how does the Israeli public respond when boundaries between faith and duty seem to blur? We are fortunate, very fortunate, to be joined today by Dr. Niva Golan Nadir. She is a research associate at the Center for Policy Research, Rockefeller College of Public Affairs and Policy at SUNY, the State University New York, Albany, and a research fellow at the Institute for Liberty and Responsibility at the Reichman University in Israel, where she also teaches comparative politics and research methodology. During 2024, she was a visiting scholar at NYU's Taub Center for Israel Studies. Her research focuses on comparative politics with a special interest in Israel and Turkey, state-religion relations, Israel studies, and public administration. So a handful of that. She explores persistent gaps between public preferences, policy design, and implementation. Her latest book, Public Preferences and Institutional Designs, Israel and Turkey Compared, was published in 2022 by Palgrave Macmillan and was awarded the finalist and honorary mention by the Azrieli Institute for Israel Studies at Concordia University. I am also delighted to share with you that as of this morning, she's also a recipient of the Association for Israel Studies research grant for her next research project, Israeli Public Elementary School Principles in the Context of State-Religion Relations. So I believe, confident that she's the right person to talk about this stuff. As always in these events, Dr. Golan Nadir will speak for about 35 minutes or so, and then we will open the floor, quote unquote, for questions, comments, and responses. Please feel free to type those in the designated Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. My friend, Dr. Golan Nadir, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and Professor Saltzman, and good afternoon for everyone. Indeed, a beautiful afternoon here in Israel as well. I am currently in Israel, and I'm going to give this webinar from here. I'm just going to share the presentation. Okay, so the topic that I'm going to talk about today, of course, as Professor Saltzman explained and introduced thoroughly, my realm is the realm of comparative politics and also state-religion relations. And I try and examine different policies, and specifically in the Israeli case, because it is a very a very complex case if we are talking about these two variables, and specifically when we see policy designed by religion to a certain extent. This specific research is focusing on the military and, as introduced, balancing faith and duty, religious policy, and public discontent in the Israeli military. I just want to mention that this is co-authored with Dr. Michael Friedman from the School of Political Science at the University of Haifa. I would like to give a general framework, if you may, just before I begin exploring the phenomenon that I'm going to talk about today. So basically, within the democratic theory, the democratic process as described in literature usually describes the institutional designs, hence the legal institutional arrangements, and it indicates that when these arrangements actually lose their legitimacy from the citizens, we will expect civil dissatisfaction, and in return, we will expect that there will be a change in policy in accordance with public preferences. Of course, it is not 100%, but to a very large extent. But there is actually what we call a democratic deficit. In a democratic deficit, we have the institutional designs, but they have a certain policy barrier. The policy barrier that I'm going to talk about today is religion. And when these institutional designs lose their legitimacy, and we see civil dissatisfaction as expressed, it could be through a civil protest or through just public opinion surveys, we still see that the policy does not change, and hence we experience an enduring gap. And in societies where we see a division, and it could be a division of different sorts. In this case today, I'm talking about a religious division. We actually see that this enduring gap is due to the fact that there are a lot of different groups that their preferences cannot be addressed. So we experience all-embracing dissatisfaction. So I would like to generally introduce the idea of state-religion relations in Israel. Of course, this is a very, very general introduction, but Israel was established as a Jewish and democratic state. It was established in May 1948. And the fact that we see religious policy embedded in state institutions was simply in order to establish the state. David Ben-Gurion and the Zionist movement had to align with Agudat Israel, the ultra-Orthodox movement, in order to show a unified front to the UN and, well, get a state. So in a letter, simply a letter from 1947, David Ben-Gurion writes Agudat Israel, and he states, "We will, in the newborn state, respect policy in different realms, and this policy definitely will keep and preserve Jewish tradition and law. These realms are the Shabbat, keeping the holy day of Saturday, and this includes transport and commerce. There's a lot of components to it. Kashrut, kosher food, and of course, I am talking about public institutions in the personal realm. People can do whatever they want, but we are talking about the public realm. Also marriage in Israel, officially there's only religious marriage, and education, different routes to educate, but of course each strand has its own schools, and these are official religious policies that roughly 8 decades later they're kept. But still, there are a lot of other concerns and consequences from these issues, and this includes burial, which is also religious, conversion to Judaism, of course, in accordance with the ultra-Orthodox strand of Judaism, not the Reform and Conservative, autopsy, and of course conscription, which I will also mention today because we can not talk about the IDF and religion as of today without mentioning the acute topic of ultra-Orthodox men conscription. So a little bit about the level of religiosity among Israeli Jews. This is official statistics. In Israel, 73.5% percent of Israelis are affiliated as Jews, among which, of course, this is people describing their own tendencies. So 44.2% are non-religious secular Jews, 32.7% are traditional, 11.5% describe themselves as religious, and 10.8% describe themselves as ultra-Orthodox. So this is roughly 22% of Israeli Jews that are religious and highly religious. So in different surveys conducted by the Institute for Liberty and Responsibility, we have actually examined dissatisfaction with these religious policies in Israel. And well, the numbers are high. Roughly 60% of Israeli Jews are dissatisfied with these policies. Of course, as the level of religiosity increases, citizens are more dissatisfied. So you can see that the secular segment is almost 90% of it is dissatisfied with the policies, and the ultra-Orthodox are well, the opposite tendency of 0% dissatisfied. They are very satisfied with the fact that religious policies are still instated in Israel. So this is the idea. This is Israel. This is the policies, and I would like to just visit a little bit some concepts related to divided societies and to religion, and then of course talk about the actual case study of the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces. So first of all, what is a divided society? Ties, whether political, ethnic, linguistic, or religious, they create segmentation across the different groups in society. When we are talking about a society which is divided in accordance to religious guidelines, so this private case is actually referred to as confessionalism. So Lebanon, for example, experiences the same definition. And basically, in order to have this society thriving and existing and continuing the democratic regime, there is a manual, if you may. You can read about it specifically. It is described in great lines by Arendt Leiphart. And you can definitely see that if this is managed correctly, this society can definitely be very satisfied with existing policies. Now, when we're talking about religion is usually described in an institutional form that structured the relationship between the state, the institutions, and religion in the public sphere. Usually democracies that do not, to different extent, there is no perfect, complete separation of religion and state in any democracy. But of course, in Israel, this is to a larger extent. So democratic states that do not separate religion and politics, we see these religious components incorporated into policies. Hence, also religious departments, the courts, they're all embedded in state institutions, and they actually being enforced. The policy is enforced and sanctioned by the government. Now, when we're talking about religion and dissatisfaction, this realm is usually discussed in the literature of the economics of religion. So governmental regulation usually holds a critical role in shaping religious trends and events. Of course, no single religion is likely to satisfy all the citizens, but also in a very culturally homogeneous population. For example, in the Israeli case, we're talking about the majority of Jewish citizens. Even among this population, the degree of religiosity or the different movement of the religion definitely imply that pluralism is in order to keep citizens satisfy. So when there is no such alternatives, that it does not exist, we will see and experience social dissatisfaction as to this religion. Now, religion in the Israeli military, the Israel Defense Forces, is something that on one hand, the military expresses and explains everything, all the segments and ideas and practices and ceremonies, religious ceremonies that exist and are offered to soldiers by the military. But at the same time, a lot is unknown. Of course, militaries and social security institutions are quite discreet. And this is what the IDF is experiencing, and the population, of course, that wants to know more. It is a state institution. It was has embedded the state's religious policies. It was established in 1948 with the IDF itself. The rabbinate, the military rabbinate, was formed. The military has a chief rabbi. It is appointed by the military's chief of staff. And representatives of the rabbinate oversee everything. In every military unit, there is representation of the military rabbinate. They implement religious guidelines, and they offer all the services: synagogues, marriage, keeping the Shabbat, holidays, burial, conversion to Judaism. Everything exists within this framework of the military. Additionally, there are multiple unofficially regulated practices in the military. It is known through the media, through mass media, sometimes through social media. Soldiers that want to complain about something that has happened and has to do with religion, we can see it also on social media. Usually about kosher food inspections, that they actually enter the private residency of the soldiers to see that everything is kosher. Specifically, there's a debate about Passover. Not allowing women singing in ceremonies due to religious, more religious, not ultra-Orthodox, but more religious soldiers that are present in the event. Commanders that on their own decision initiate prayers before combat as a part of the military practices. And of course, the swords of iron war, the ongoing war in Israel, when there's a lot of religious components that are dealt with now. But as you can see in the picture below, this is the Messiah badge that many soldiers place on their arm, on their uniform. There is a military command that bans this badge. It is granted to the soldiers by religious associations that, of course, are civil and are not military related, but they still wear it, which is also a great, interesting debate ongoing. So what is the research question and the hypothesis here? So we ask, how do military institutions, how do they maintain operational cohesion and organizational legitimacy when implementing religious policies in religiously divided societies? As I said, confessionalism. So we hypothesize, and we call it the balanced dissatisfaction hypothesis, that military institutions implementing religious policies to generate similar levels of dissatisfaction across different religious groups will maintain higher level of cohesion and legitimacy than those with policies that disproportionately disadvantage specific groups. So we want everyone to feel dissatisfied or satisfied to the same extent. Okay, not having one group feeling more dissatisfied than the other. So basically, this hypothesis stresses that we have the institutional realm, the state institution that holds the single policy. It has to the trait is to balance the dissatisfaction. The result is that specifically when we're talking about religion, and I've discussed the economy of religion, we cannot actually satisfy everyone if we have a single policy. So we experience social dissatisfaction, and this mutual dissatisfaction actually contributes to the cohesion, legitimacy, and stability of the institution. Really briefly, this is a mixed method design. We use textual analysis of primary and secondary sources. I will mention the newspaper archival review here. Existing statistics in order to examine the phenomenon, well, at least a decade back. And public opinion surveys that we have conducted with the Institute for Liberty and Responsibility to understand the extent of dissatisfaction. So in this thematic review, we have uncovered 5 actually really interesting topics. The first being the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredi conscription, the fact that since state establishment, ultra-Orthodox men are not drafted to the military. I will visit this notion by the end of the talk today because it has a lot to do with the war. But this is still the most common trait when we are talking about religion in the Israeli military. Also, religious objection to mixed gender service. The IDF is proud of mixed gender service, but of course with more religious segments entering the IDF, this is quite problematic for them. But then we have the secular segment and the more religious one talking about discrimination, all from their viewpoint. Religious restrictions on non-kosher food, as I mentioned, the Passover, not eating bread, kosher restrictions in private residence as well, is something really problematic that has reached the High Court here to find a solution. A demand for non-discrimination on religious grounds, still the fact that there are a lot of adjustments for religious soldiers leave the secular ones feeling disadvantaged. A really short example, religious soldiers are allowed to grow a beard while the secular ones, they have to go through a long process of approvals in order to be able to do that. This was also a great debate. And finally, an expanding phenomenon of exploiting the war, and we're talking about the current Swords of Iron War, for religious preaching, these social associations, sometimes even the private sector, different elements trying to insert more religious content into the IDF. Now, going to the public opinion survey that we've conducted with the Institute for Liberty and Responsibility, we tried and find whether this notion of being dissatisfied just the same in all the different segments of religious groups in the Israeli society, does this actually evident in public opinion? So the first question we asked was, do you agree that in general, the IDF holds an equally respectful attitudes towards religious and secular soldiers? So as you can see, 68.7% agreed and strongly agreed that the equality is kept. Even if you feel dissatisfied, it is still equal. Of course, the ultra-Orthodox, and I always highlight the ultra-Orthodox just so you can see that they're the ones that strongly disagree because their expectation is higher, much higher. Further, in your opinion, to what extent does the IDF provide religious services to its soldiers? And of course, we've mentioned all those services that we've mentioned before. So roughly 70% argue that these services are supplied to a large extent or to a very large extent. And of course, as level of religiosity increases, the percentages decrease, since the secular group, of course, thinks that this is a lot. Also, to which, in your opinion, should a religious soldier obey if there is a conflict between a military order and a rabbinic ruling? So 60% said that the military command, of course, is the one to follow. But this is a really important number now for the policymakers that want to draft the ultra-Orthodox group, because 88.89% of the ultra-Orthodox respondents said they will listen to their rabbi and not to their commander. So this raises a lot of concerns if you are actually going to draft this religious group. For the final question, and I think this is the one that really highlights the hypothesis completely: which group's needs are met more by the IDF, the religious or the secular? So you can see that here in the religious soldiers, 25.93% believe that the religious soldiers, their needs are met more. Roughly the same, 28.79% believe that the secular soldiers, but 31% say both. Okay, so numbers and the statistics does show that there is mutual dissatisfaction. The numbers are really similar in all groups of religiosity. So one more trait that we decided to examine is distrust. Because if there is shared dissatisfaction with policy, we would expect that there is low trust in this institution that you feel so dissatisfied with. So in the Institute for Liberty and Responsibility, we've actually examined trust from 2022 to 2025, but trust in or distrust in the IDF is quite low, and especially if we compare it to other state institutions, and I will show this in a minute. So the levels of distrust in the IDF remain relatively steady, also similar across the different groups: secular, traditional, and religious. It is 15%, 14%, 16%, roughly similar. The ultra-Orthodox, of course, roughly 40%. Again, this is their ongoing debate with the IDF. They're not interested in being recruited, but still, if we compare their distrust in the IDF with other state institutions, it is also really low. Going a decade back, distrust in the IDF, still the same numbers: 9%, 8%, 9%, and the ultra-Orthodox with 30% going to 2015. And the distrust in the IDF is still really low. But if we go to other state institutions, it is highly evident that distrust is really high, between 70 to 80%, with the Israeli Knesset, the parliament, the government. Hence, the more political institutions are distrusted. Also, the High Court, we can see that the levels of distrust, perhaps it is a bit lower, but still compared with the IDF is quite high. And the ultra-Orthodox, the number here is really interesting: 97% distrust the High Court. The High Court ruled that the IDF has to draft the ultra-Orthodox men, and this is hence the levels of distrust. Finally, you can see that the institution of the presidency experiences lower levels of distrust, between 20 and 30%, and this is again an institution, Israeli institution, which is less political. The Israeli president is more symbolic, not elected by the citizens, hence a bit more trusted than the other institutions. But if we compare this to the IDF is trusted more, despite the fact that these segments are dissatisfied. So some conclusions just about this specific research before I go and visit the war and the ultra-Orthodox conscription. So from a democratic perspective, the military is a state institution in a religiously divided society and faced by all-encompassing dissatisfaction amongst the groups of all levels of religiosity. Each group believes that they are discriminated against with no concrete face value of who is actually affected negatively more by its policies. But this joins dissatisfaction, and we can see it with the low distrust in the military, maintains the institution's cohesion and legitimacy. And hence, we can definitely say that confessionalism, a society which is a democratic regime, which is the ties, the split is based on religious ties, both in this case, both accounting for public preferences as we expect in democratic theory, but also not accounting for public preferences still keeps institutional stability, but as long as it is conducted equally. So equality is more important than actually eliminating the democratic deficit that we've started the talk with today of accounting to public preferences. I also want to mention that I see religion, this variable, as a paradigmatic case. Many times religion is treated as an irregular variable, but this is not the case. This theory, this framework can definitely be tested both in other democratic states, but of course, separate religion and state to a larger extent, but also in other policy realms. So religion is definitely just a case study and is paradigmatic. Taking a normative inquiry, so we ask, when would the religious barrier cease? And this will change. It will be a more pluralistic environment. And we thought that perhaps an existential necessity will cause this to change. But then we have faced this critical juncture, the Swords of Iron War, and still we see there is no change, but something is going on. And this has a lot to do with the ultra-Orthodox men conscription that I've mentioned throughout the talk today. So just briefly, why are we talking about this today? By the way, it's not just today. For roughly 8 decades, having the ultra-Orthodox contribute, we call it equal burden, to the service and the protection of the state is something that was dealt with. Of course, more or less depend on who is in government. Is it the right or the left segment that forms coalitions with the more religious parties? But now it is critical because of the war, and I will give you some numbers to explain why. So first of all, just to say, with state establishment, 400 Torah students were exempt from military service by David Ben-Gurion. It was done because most of the Torah students were actually murdered in the Holocaust, and it made sense that such a low number will be exempt. They will contribute to the country spiritually, and this arrangement took place in state establishment. It was institutionalized by law only in 1958. But by then, David Ben-Gurion already regretted his decision to do that because the numbers increased and increased, and we're today on 80,000 ultra-Orthodox men. The reason for such increase is fertility rates among the Israeli Jewish women, and specifically the ultra-Orthodox one. So we are talking about 6.38 children per ultra-Orthodox women, and of course only 1.98 for non-religious secular Jewish women. Now, due to the Swords of Iron War, the military has no manpower. So the official statement says that the IDF urgently needs an addition of 1,200 soldiers. 7,000 of them has to be in combat roles. During the war, 856 has died in battle, and roughly 14,000 disabled and cannot continue their service. And this is, of course, in addition to the numbers that the soldiers that are drafted each year annually. And we're also talking about the reserve duty. So during the war, reserve duty actually faced a challenge, a great challenge. Most of them actually served for a third of the year, compared with just 8 days the previous year before of the war. But when we try and examine what happens with the ultra-Orthodox candidate, we see that only 540 enlisted from 66,000 eligible ultra-Orthodox men, and the numbers are actually really, really low. At the midst of this situation, we have the fact that the law of recruiting these men actually expired. There's no law. They have to be drafted now. But the government, the right-wing government, the Netanyahu government that holds a coalition with the religious parties, and hence are debating the topic. They have initiated this law. It is not yet legislated, but it is quite debated. There's a lot of civil protest about this. They actually want 50% of the annual cycle of 18-year-olds from the ultra-Orthodox sector only drafted within 7 years. But at the same time that they're not actually drafting these men right now, they have actually increased the age of reserve duty in 1 year, and they gave them mandatory service. They've increased their service in 3 months for 5 years. So all the burden again goes to the more secular groups in society, and the ultra-Orthodox men are not drafted. We see a lot of civil protest for equal burden, a lot of social protest, a lot of debates about that. But at the same time, the ultra-Orthodox men are saying we'd rather die than be drafted, and they call it a war against religion. So this is a really heated debate, and at the midst this really long and difficult war. So just looking forward, we have a very complex situation. And when we're talking about institutions, we have the military. It is in need of ultra-Orthodox soldiers, but the implementation is complex. There's a lot of considerations when we're talking about ultra-Orthodox needs as to religion. We have the High Court. The exemption is no longer constitutional. They say, the court says they have to be drafted now. So we have politicians. They pose hardships, prioritize their coalition with the ultra-Orthodox parties. Hence, they hold back. We have civil society protest against the arrangement, but also against the overall government since even before the war. We have the actual community, the ultra-Orthodox community that demands keeping their multicultural arrangements. Also, just a quick note, individuals, those soldiers that are actually drafting are following that. They are ostracized by their family and community, and they suffer a lot for it. And the overall framework, the war is an existential necessity that actually abolishes these past institutional designs. At the end of the day, this power sharing that I've mentioned is part as confessionalism, prescribed in a veto cannot be actually maintained, and those arrangements has to check with the different religious groups in society. Finally, the new chief of staff, just taking office a few weeks back, he's saying there are 80,000 ultra-Orthodox men. They're waiting for their conscription orders. When will this happen? But since he said that, zero orders were sent out. So this is the imbalance that the system is now experiencing. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Golan Nadir. If you can stop sharing the screen, we'll have, there you go, fantastic, excellent. This was brilliant and a lot of things to think about. I was writing a bunch of notes, and I'm going to encourage the audience to type their questions, comments, and remarks in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I know that you focused on the IDF as a case study, so to speak, as a prism through which to understand these relations. Can you talk about the broader, just to open up the conversation, to kind of talk about the broader religious societal trends in Israel today? Because it seems like that if the IDF is a microcosm, is a function of broader things that are happening in Israel society. So how do the two relate to one another? Is Israel becoming more religious, and as a result, there's a need to address religiosity or religious aspects in the IDF? What's the big picture, small IDF, so to speak, relationship is?
Thank you. This is a great question. It is really interesting because if we're talking about the actual growth in population, so the ultra-Orthodox segment actually increases on the expense of this more secular strand of the population. But the different strands that we see definitely show that the Israeli citizens, they want something else. And we can see it in marriage with initiating different alternative under the legislative threshold alternatives to the religious policy. We see local governments taking on religious pluralism as their aim and changing the rules of the game. And one of the most important phenomenon that took place was transport on the Shabbat, on the Saturday. The local governments are now supplying non-paying free service of transportation during the 26 hours of the Shabbat in order for their citizens to be able to travel. And now we have roughly 20 cities commuting between one another, creating something that never happened in Israel before. So we see a lot of initiatives. It comes from below, citizens longing for this, expressing their will, and we see local government along with civil society creating these alternatives. This is also a factor that influences the fact that if the IDF is the army of the people, so we want us to express ourselves and our preferences there. And this also goes to the notion and the a battle on kosher food, and specifically on Passover, as I've mentioned before.
All righty, we have a question from the audience, and they jumped the gun, so to speak, off the gate. How much of the dissatisfaction is personal? It is due to the role that Benjamin Netanyahu plays in the current state of affairs in Israel. Is there more ideological? Is it transactional? Is it opportunistic? What is it?
So since we took it back, at least a decade back, and I can say even longer than this, we see dissatisfaction existing at all times. So since state establishment, so this is something that actually indicates this is not personal. Of course, that today all these elements, it comes together because we are talking about the war, and we are talking about the the changes in, or at least the initiative to change different policies, and this was highly objected by citizens and civil society even before. So it all comes to the same thing. We are experiencing more and more hardship in our lives, and the military is where we give, and we want to get back as well.
Alrighty. So the question is there something that has changed dramatically? And by that, I mean, for example, Yagil Levy from the Open University writes extensively about the changing landscape within the IDF, right? The old guards or the old elites from the kibbutzim and the middle and upper class have, to some extent, to a large extent, perhaps, made way or kind of left these commanding positions that were previously held, and now it's being manned by different individuals from the periphery, and as a result, kind of more traditional, more religious, if you like, concerned, religiously in that sense, more than Orthodox or religious Zionist. You see more yarmulkes around the chief of staff or in the general staff of the army. So it is what it is. The country is changing, society is changing. So why fight it? It's impossible. The trends, the demographic trends, the societal trends are different. It is what it is. It's just a matter of time, so to speak.
So, well, I think that there's certain layers to this. So first of all, I would like to begin by something that you've mentioned, which is true. We see more yarmulke wearing commanders. I've mentioned that there are some religious aspects that we just know about through media or social media. And this has a lot to do with what these commanders do, because there is no way to know about it without these soldiers reporting or complaining to their families, to their friends, and to the media. And we definitely see that. So initiating prayers before combat is definitely a part of it. And these association or commanders that know that the chief of staff said, do not wear the Messiah patch on your uniform, but they say it's okay. So this is conflicting authority in a highly orderly and commanding institution. And these are challenges that we face now. Now, the fact that we have more yarmulke wearing commanders, or even generally, we see more strands of the population that are more religious. But there is a great difference between being a religious Zionist and being an ultra-Orthodox. The religious Zionists are fighting the battle like everyone else, but the ultra-Orthodox are not. And this is the debate. This is the debate because reserve duty is collapsing, and this is a reserve duty based institution, military institution. Hence, this is why right now we see the Israeli society demanding the change. It is an existential necessity, hence a critical juncture. I cannot hear you.
So sorry. We have a question that addresses a different religious aspect of the IDF, not the Jewish one, which is something that we need to be very much aware of. And the question is as follows. As we know, the IDF also has Muslim soldiers, Druze, Muslims, Christians as well. So for example, the Muslims, do they get to eat halal food, kosher food for a Muslim in that sense? If you know, I know they can eat kosher food while halal food is not available. Is that true if you have that knowledge? And how does the IDF try to cater to or to address and accommodate other religious sects or other religions within the IDF?
Oh, this is a brilliant question. So first of all, the IDF is simply a small component, an institution within a state that is constructed by multiple institutions. So the great institutional design is definitely embedded in each institution. So there is a policy and containment to all religions in Israel. It is really interesting. I always say that Jews are actually saying this is discrimination. But if we are talking about Israel as a state addressing multicultural and religious aspects, Israel does this in a highly pluralistic and accommodating way. So if, as I've mentioned, Jews can only marry in the Jewish rabbinate, it goes the same to all other religions in their courts, in their communal courts and religions. So this is actually really pluralistic. So the same goes to the army. Just like we have, the military has a brigade, or a battalion, which is ultra Orthodox, it has the same, which is Druze, and it accommodates their needs. This is why it is an isolated, of course, a unit, but definitely you can see scattered soldiers that by their personal preferences, they've decided that they feel really okay with it and well with it because perhaps they're secular in their orientation, even if they're not from the same religion, to serve in a mixed, regular, if you may, unit.
All righty, so we have a follow-up from David Siegel, who's a very good friend of ours, a retired faculty here at the university, and he follows up on the food question, and I've never thought about that. But for example, can IDF soldiers, he asked, can they eat halal food if kosher food is not available? Not in terms of the religious side of it, in terms of the degree of kosher with the halal kind of satisfied certain requirements or minimum requirements, but in terms of the availability. For example, if you're in a Golani brigade, for example, do you as a Jewish soldier, as well as a Muslim soldier, do you have access to the same kind of food? Very technical, but very interesting nevertheless.
Yeah. So the military's kitchens are strictly Jewish kosher, strictly Jewish kosher. And I'm gonna I want to give a note, a small note as to the war. In the morning after October 7th, when all soldiers went back to the bases and the reserves scattered all around, civil society, and not just civil society, Jewish society woke up. We are going to cook for you and we're going to deliver food for you. This is what we do in Israel. We give food as a reward. So they all traveled to the bases and they gave away food, and the military's rabbis threw it away. It doesn't matter if it is a war or not. It is highly restrictive. Some restaurants in Tel Aviv, by the way, that delivered a lot of food to soldiers and the different bases, they actually went on a quick kosher certificate process just in order to be able to actually give them the food. Okay, a lot was thrown away. So the kitchens are strictly Jewish. I suppose that in the more closed units of those Muslim Druze soldiers, it is different, but in the regular basis, you will find the Jewish food, the Jewish kosher food.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pivot away from the food because I'm getting hungry. It's about lunch here. This is a political question, and I have two that kind of follow up each other and kind of chime with one another. Do you believe that if Israel was run by a more left-leaning government, in other words, kind of the opposition of today becomes the coalition of tomorrow, would they attempt to require ultra-Orthodox conscription? And even if they did, would it work or would they refuse? In other words, is this something that can be solved by a changing of the political landscape in the Israeli parliament, in the Knesset?
Basically, yes. I would say, and despite it, I'm an institutionalist, so I hate to say that agency can do this, but it happened in 2014. So back then, the government with Yair Lapid, member of Knesset Yair Lapid, he was able to alter the law and have a different law that it's always a process. It's never, well, tomorrow 10,000s of Haredi men are now joining the military. No, but it is a process. But he was able to enact a law in the coalition structured back then. Less than a year later, the right-wing Netanyahu government took office and Netanyahu canceled it altogether. And you can see, you asked me before about different policies in the Israeli context. The same happened 3 years back. The unity government of Naftali Bennett initiated a kosher food law that was more pluralistic. And a few months back, Netanyahu eliminated it altogether when he took government. So you can definitely see this happening in coalition change. But since this is really an institutional barrier, a lock-in since state establishment, you see the changes only, even the agency are actually initiating change only at the fringes of the policy. The core policy itself, implementing religion in state institution, does not change in Israel.
Alrighty, this one is from Paul Sham, who's a colleague of ours here, faculty at the university. Aren't you somewhat conflating two opposite problems or challenges, I would say? The lack of Haredim, ultra-Orthodox service, military service, and on the other hand, the over-enthusiasm by the Dati Leumi or the modern Orthodox or the religious Zionists. Their attitudes are completely opposite. Are they? So I'll just add, are they different in that regard? Yes, because one community serves, the other one does not. But is there a different approach to questions, for example, of source of authority? Who do you obey? Who do you follow? We have precedent for the religious Zionists or the Dati Leumi, but not for the ultra-Orthodox.
So this is an interesting question, and I was actually thinking about this before because I was not planning on, or at least within the framework of our research, I did not visit the idea of conscription by the ultra-Orthodox, and this is something that, as we talked prior to the webinar, I said I want to talk about something really up to date because this is something important to talk about, so we've just added this, but the very idea of the research is to show the different components and the different attitudes from the different levels of religiosity. Now, yes, religious Zionists and the ultra-Orthodox are completely different populations. There is no comparing. Ultra-Orthodox are not intending to contribute to the burden of service. This is one. But when we are talking about religious Zionists, they want to serve, but they also want religious spirit with it. And this religious spirit, this prayer before initiating battle, and the Messiah badge, and those different religious traits that are more even spiritual, if you may, are something that the other less religious groups are less comfortable with in the scope of the military. So yes, this question is right to the point. This is completely different, but still, the very idea of religiosity between secular, traditional, and religious is really different. It's really different, and there is a lot of conflict. For example, if a woman would start singing in a ceremony, official ceremony initiated by the military, religious soldiers would leave the room. Okay, and this is not something that is it is just in an institution like a military.
Alrighty, we have another question about food, but again, I'm going to try to avoid that just because I'm getting hungry. So, with your permission, let's try and talk about, again, big picture. There's a question, part of the conversation about the enlistment of Haredi or ultra-Orthodox Jews to the military has to do with the relationship between the genders, between men and women primarily, right? And this is not the only place where these conversations are taking place. For example, there are campuses that are, or programs that are designed for or segregated for women as opposed to men and so on and so forth. How do the two things kind of shape one another? What is the role of gender relations, both in the IDF and perhaps in the broader Israeli society, the landscape there?
Yeah, but this is really interesting and also connects to previous question, because definitely we see we see the military as reflecting something that happens in the general population. So yes, in more religious societies, the genders are separated. Of course, there are a lot of other components to it of restriction, okay, a lot of restriction, but definitely it happens and happens in the general population as well. So there's a lot of debate about public events. Sometimes Yom Kippur the fasting of Yom Kippur was a great example where some local governments, as I said, they're really pluralistic religiously. They decided to hold joint prayers in the public sphere. And religious groups were actually in the different cities were actually appealing to the court to change that, because it is not respectful to do in the Orthodox segment of Judaism. Again, debate of different universities that actually allow courses for women only. And men separately. So this is an ongoing debate between liberalism and multiculturalism, and I have to say it is not something. It is not something to argue about when you don't have a joint formula. As Mason said, you don't have a joint formula to argue from. You come from two different viewpoints, so it is just a normative, plain discussion as of what is better. Okay, this is part of the Israeli definition, multiculturalism. Hence, it is more important to respect the group than the individual. So it goes the same to the different policies and strands in the country, but it is definitely embedded in the military.
Alrighty. Another question about religious segregation within the military, kind of different units. To what extent are units religiously segregated in the IDF? This would have to be the case for if non-Jewish soldiers are entitled to their own cuisine. Again, going back to the food issue, but kind of more broadly speaking, is there an effort in the IDF to be more inclusive or more respective of these religious or cultural differences? We know of the Haredi battalion, Netzach Yehuda, and we know of the Druze battalion, for example. Is there more effort? We're seeing more efforts, for example, to integrate men and women together. Karakal is one example, but there are. So what's the trend? Unless it's something that is more case specific?
So the IDF is a mixed gender military institution. Since state establishment, women contributed equally. And this trend is kept. So you have mentioned Karakal, of course, it's a fighting unit. And what we see is women entering the more fighting professions. It was not the case in the past. There's the stigma of the woman soldier making coffee. It is not the case anymore. And yes, this is actually a really conflicting trend. Modernization, women entering the workforce, the military, and at the same time, you have an institution that has to respect religion, hence the conflict within the two, because the secular societies is secular and it is of mixed gender, and at the same time you want to have these more religious segments join the military, but you cannot do it if you do not keep these arrangements that they hold to well, religiously.
Alrighty, and again, food is one part of it, kind of one manifestation, the cuisine, the idea of, for example, even secular Jews who are unable, from their perspective, to express their secularism, right? To eat dairy and meat at the same time. Some soldiers were indicted, were sent to jail or were confined as a result of that. So, kind of final question, perhaps. You mentioned this idea of the People's Army. This is the model, right? Israel is a People's Army. What does this conversation about religion in the IDF do to perhaps exploring the option of a professional army, which is one of the other models that exists in this landscape of militaries. For example, here in the United States, if you want to join, you join, like you get your salary, you get compensated, and it's a professional route. It's a vocational decision that you take.
So you're asking me this, and I think about nationalism. The military is, well, first of all, it is a state which is challenged frequently, and the use of the army is frequent. Hence, and this is what this sort of iron war actually expresses, this is something that you need a lot of manpower for. And I do not believe that taking on a professional army, you will be able to find so many people, and also in reserves, saying that the military is their vocation. So this is one which is more technical, but I want to go to the ideological explanation. The military, the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, is the Israel Defense Forces. It defends Israel, which is a democratic but a Jewish state. So the commitment is first and foremost to the state of the Jews, and of course the Jewish segment of the population. We must not forget that Arab Israelis, that are roughly 20%, if not even higher, they are not, to the most part, drafted. And it's not just because they don't want. Just as well, the majority does not want that, okay, because of the national conflict. So those components together, these explanations together, construct this really complex entity we call the IDF.
Yeah, certainly challenging times, certainly challenging process that the IDF, like Israeli society perhaps as a whole, is undergoing. All righty, my friends, it's 1:40 according to my watch, local time, Eastern. So I'd like to thank you very much, Dr. Golan Nadir, for this wonderful presentation, for this excellent insights. I want to thank everybody in the audience who joined us today for the last event of the academic year. We look forward to seeing you in the fall. In the meantime, please have a wonderful, wonderful summer break if you are a student or a faculty. And if you're a member of the community, please stay in touch. We look forward to having these conversations directly, indirectly, online, offline, in person, or whatever other format. Thank you so much for joining us. Once again, thank you so much, Dr. Golan Nadir, for sharing your time with us.
Thank you so much.